All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming. Great to see so many familiar faces here on a Wednesday evening. So I really appreciate it. And yeah, I mean, just to echo Dylan's sentiments, it's a real privilege and a pleasure to have arguably the greatest caddy in golfing history with us here at Royal Wellington. Talking predominantly about his latest book that's been out for about 3 months now. That is co-written with Evin Priest, detailing his 12 years on the bag of Tiger Woods. So, Steve, thanks again for being here. Really looking forward to this chat. And it's been a while since you've been here to Royal Wellington. What are some of your early memories of being here, caddying for some pretty interesting players? I know 1976 New Zealand Open is a pretty momentous time in your young caddying career. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, well, it's actually it's like a very special place, Royal Wellington, because it's where my journey started, and it's where my inspiration came to be a golf caddy. In 1976, I caddied for Peter Thompson here at the New Zealand Open, and after the week, my father introduced me to Peter. They used to have a tournament at Paraparaumu called the Caltex Invitational, which my dad played in as an amateur. Got to know Peter Thompson, and he organised for me to caddy for him here at the New Zealand Open. In a nutshell, as a kid, I caddied often on every weekend at Paraparaumu, and it started out as being 50 cents a round, $1 a round, and it climbed up to about $5 a round, and most of the caddies were getting $2 a round, and I was getting $5 because I had a bit of a knack for caddying. I don't know why, I don't know how, but I did. And I caddied for Peter here at the New Zealand Open. He gave me $150. Well, I mean, $150 at 12 years of age when I was making about $5 at the golf course. I can distinctly remember driving back with my father. We lived at Pukeru Bay at the time. And I'm just thinking, what is all this caddying stuff about? I've got to get into this. And the following week was the New Zealand Shell Open at Titirangi, and I was caddying for Peter, and he was paired with Graham Marsh, the Australian player. And Graham had Nick DePaul on the bag, and Nick DePaul later went on to caddy for Severiano Ballesteros and had an illustrious career as a caddy as well. And anyway, I asked Nick, and he was great. He told me the ins and outs, what you do, how do you do it, and so school went out the window straight away. And I worked in a butcher shop for a guy called Alan James, who some of you probably might know, and made enough money in the 2 years that I had remaining supposed to be at Cavity College, and started my journey at 15 years of age.
No, it's a pretty amazing story. And, you quickly got on the bag of some pretty massive names relatively early on in your caddying career. You talked there about Peter Thompson. You had Ian Baker-Finch, who's recently been out here to New Zealand. You had Mike Clayton, and then, of course, Greg Norman. And I believe at the time, it was quite hard to caddy over in the States. So you did a lot of stuff in Australia and Asia for Greg, and then became Greg's full-time caddy. If we fast forward then, Greg and then Raymond Floyd, and then Tiger's bag becomes available. You'd already had such a great start to your caddying career. And I think that at one point you thought about maybe coming back to New Zealand and around 2000 and starting a caddy academy or something along those lines. What was your thought when Tiger's bag became available?
What do you think?
Yeah. Sounds good.
Yeah, well, look, it was my first tournament of the year in 99. I was caddying for Raymond Floyd at the time. He didn't play any of the West Coast tournaments that year, and his first tournament was at Miami at the Durrell tournament. So I flew from New Zealand to Miami. I was at the course on Tuesday morning, and there was a lot of talk around the driving range on the putting green about, Tiger had let his caddy go, which was news to me because I wasn't caddying the week before at the LA Open. I did. There's a lot of talk about who's going to get the bag, and I didn't give it any thought. So that night, Tuesday night, I'm in my hotel room, and the phone rings, and I've got a close friend of mine who's a professional golfer, and he can imitate Tiger to a T. His swing, his voice, everything about it. And it was fairly late, or not late, but it was late considering I just, flown in from New Zealand, caddied that day in Miami, and then, in my hotel room, the phone rings, and I thought it was my mate, Bob. I said, "Oh, fuck, Bob, it's late, and just give me a call tomorrow, mate," and down the phone goes. A couple of minutes later, the phone rings again. I said, "Fuck, Bob, it's really late, mate. You can talk to me tomorrow. Just, give us a chance to get some sleep today. We're off at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning." Down the phone. Rings again. Maybe it's not Bob, and it was Tiger. And straight away, he liked the banter that went on straight away on that phone call. So I caddied in that tournament that week. Tiger was living in Orlando at the time. So after the tournament in Miami, I went up to Tiger's place on the Monday following that, and went to talk to him about, caddying for him. I knocked at the door at his house, and he came to the door, and it struck me a bit odd straight away. He called me Stevie, and I hated that. There was I don't know why he said that, and I didn't say anything to him. But anyway, he said, "I'll just come in and sit down. I'll be right there with you in a minute." And he was playing a video game, a war video game, and the intensity of which he was playing this game blew me away. I thought, and I'm sitting there thinking, man, if this guy's that intense playing a video game, what's he going to be like on the golf course? It was unbelievable. I'd never seen anybody, let alone an adult, playing a video game with so much intense. And so we chatted away and that, and he made it very evident that he was, his ultimate goal was to break Jack's record. In his garage, where he had his little workshop with all his golf clubs, and where he fiddled around with his golf court clubs, he had, on one side, he had a list of accomplishments of Jack Nicklaus right from when he was a junior, through to his amateur days to his professional and so forth. And Tiger on the other side had him paralleling where his career was at the same time as Jack's, and that was his ultimate goal. So I knew that was going to be a tall ask, and but I didn't take the job straight away. I went back to my hotel where I was caddying that week, and I made a few phone calls to a few different people that, because I actually, like you said, I was considering maybe coming back to New Zealand and getting into the coaching side of things. I'd learned a lot caddying for Raymond Floyd and Greg Norman, a few other good players, and I thought, but I took the job on, and, I guess, as they say, the rest was history.
Yeah. No, pretty unbelievable story. And in terms of, where his career was in 99, because obviously, he bursts onto the scene through the amateur and junior ranks, and then blows the doors down at Augusta, wins by 12. But he'd gone through quite a transitional period with his swing in 98, and then, it was sort of coming to fruition a bit in 99. What were your kind of impressions with him early in terms of, he obviously set outrageously high expectations, and, was that foreign compared to some of the other guys you'd caddy with?
Well, the first week that I caddied for him, he said at the completion of the week at Bay Hill, he said, "What do you think, Steve?" I said, "You're fucking overrated." He played absolutely terrible, and he hit the worst golf shot I'd ever seen a pro hit to this day. And we talked about that for ages. But he obviously, like you say, burst onto the scene and won the Masters, and the hype that surrounded him turning pro, and then immediately wins the Masters and so forth. But winning your second major is probably the most difficult thing there is in golf. It's a lot of times you fall into the first one, or you win it because you're not thinking of all the circumstances that go and how hard it is. But winning your second one is the hardest thing there is. And for him, it was no different. So given how much effort he was into, or the thing that he had about breaking Jack's record, there was some sort of instant pressure. So he went, and he won the Masters. And then he went, the rest of that year didn't win a major. Then he went all of 98, 97 and 98 without winning a major. So it came to 99, played the Masters, and then the US Open and the PGA Championship. So he'd gone like 11 majors without winning one. And I knew the pressure of that. And sort of the turning moment between a player and caddy, where you sort of cement your relationship and you cement your place where a guy trusts exactly what you're doing. It came at the PGA Championship. Tiger, that Medina, he had I believe it was a 5-shot lead starting the back 9, and he was feeling the pressure as well of trying to win a second major. And Sergio was making a bit of a run. It was quite a famous tournament for that shot that Sergio hit behind the tree. And he ran up and did that big leap. And it was a really interesting week because Sergio made a putt on the par 3 and turned around, and we were waiting on the tee, and he stared Tiger down in that, see what you can do sort of thing. And I could see he was under a bit of stress. Anyway, on the 16th hole, Tiger hit a poor tee shot on the par 3 and chipped it onto the green about 6 foot. He had a 1-shot lead at the time, and he said, "I want you to read the putt, Steve," or Stevie as he called me. And he said, I think it's left edge. And I said, "No, it's inside the hole." And he said, "You sure?" I said, "I'm positive." Knocked it in, won the tournament, and our bond was cemented with that. Most guys would say, with that situation, would agree with a player because you're scared to be wrong and scared to make the wrong decision. But that's something I've never, from day one, caddying for here for Peter Thompson right through to the last time I caddied, I always, I never, if I thought I was right with my judgment, I wouldn't let the player sway me any other way. So, then I guess the rest is history. That was 99, and then from 2000 to 2005, he played golf like no one else on this planet's ever played.
Yeah. I mean, and as you say, 99, that kind of really kicked forward things in terms of 2000, 2001. But before we kind of get into that, I mean, in the book, you detail some of the way you went about and prepared as a caddy, which was pretty unbelievable. I mean, we think about golf now, there's shot link, there's data golf, there's all these stats that everyone can just get with a quick Google search or, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But back then, the internet wasn't what it is today, and you kept a lot of your own stats to right down to the micro detail. Talk to us a bit about, how you went about, collecting that info. And I know that it wasn't just the stats, it was also about making notes about, right, if he gets into the golf course and he's walking quick, how's he going to play? If he's doing this, how's he going to play? Different states of mind, how does that affect his performance? How did you gather all that information and then use it to make a tangible difference?
Yeah, look, I mean, when you are trying to make a difference when you caddy for someone, like these thousands and thousands of caddies that want to caddy in that, and I started my own thing of doing my own statistics just so I could get a bit of a grasp on things. I started doing it with Greg. And my statistics would vary to the statistics that you were able to get through the tour, through the shot link information, to the point where, Tiger would always take the trouble out of play. So, if there's water on the left, so his fairway is going to be the right half of the fairway and the first cut of rough. That's his fairway. So if he hits it in that first cut of rough, he's happy because he's taken, that's what he's trying to do. So for me, that's a fairway hit. And then on tour, there's a lot of holes that are short par 4s that you can drive it on. And if you don't actually if you drive it in the greenside bunker, there's some holes, say for instance, a hole like the 16th hole at Durrell, you can drive the green, but it's almost impossible to keep the ball in the green. But any bunker that you go in is a relatively easy bunker shot. But if you hit it in the bunker, it's not counted as a fairway hit or a green hit, sort of thing. So I kept my own statistics. And like you said, not only the playing part of it, but the mood characteristics and that. And I just kept everything to the point where I basically got to the end of not the end, but not 2 or 3 years in caddying for Tiger, I could pretty much tell you what sort of day he was going to have before he teed off. I mean, I just kept everything, like how he moved today, what were the first few swings on the range like, what was his body language like, was there a lot of chat, not a lot of chat, and I just put it all together. And, so it was invaluable. And also after every week, the next week I would tell him, where his strengths is and where his weaknesses were and so forth. And at the end of the year, I'd compile a complete data of every every club. So he'd say he'd hit 407 irons, and this is how many. This is how many went to the right. This is how many went to the left. This is how many were long. This is how many short. And all the, and Tiger loved that because at the end of every season, I would give him something to work on, and I knew when I come back to the next season, that's what he'd do. Because he knew that that's the area of the game that he needed to work on. So yeah, it was good value.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible stuff in terms of just being able to, refine things like he did into 2000, 2001. And in terms of your yardage books as well, like most golf courses here, you can buy a yardage book just from the pro shop. But I believe that many of the courses, you drew your own yardage book, stepped them off yourself, which is pretty amazing. And, use that yardage book at St Andrews the year that he didn't hit it in one bunker. So talk to us a bit about, preparing those.
Oh, well, when I first started caddying, there was no such thing as yardage books. You had to do your own, so that's just the way it was. I caddied on the Australian tour, the Asian tour, European tour, Japanese tour. They always had yardage books in America, but outside of there, you just made your own. And you think this might be silly in that, but like holes that are over water, we had a line, and we had a 100-meter one, 200-meter one, a 300-meter one. And we would pull that line across it. It mightn't have been 100% accurate, but it was within 1 or 2 meters. That's how we did it. And of course now you can buy everything. I mean, the yardage books are so detailed. I mean, my thinking is, the role of a caddy is getting greatly diminished because so much information's there with the yardage books. While they did have these green reading books that have now been banned, and I think that's a very good move as well, because I think, as most of you know, that you play golf, part of learning to play golf and part of being a successful player is being able to read greens. I mean, if you can't read greens, it's a poor thing. Well, if you've given something that just tells you exactly how the putt breaks, I mean, but so it's pleasing that they've put those out of play. But I was doing a podcast yesterday with Colt Nost, Subpark podcast, and we were chatting a little bit about how the technology just with the shot link and all the data that the players get now. I mean, it's kind of mind-boggling. And he asked me a question. What was one of the things that stood out to you that made Tiger so good? Obviously he's a great player in that, but he played by feel. We didn't use, like, when you purchase a yardage book now in America, when this has happened, this has been since probably 2000. So, the yardage in the book will tell you how much uphill and downhill it is, and so forth. And it'll have an arrow in the book, east, north, west, south. So you used to have to figure that out yourself. So you used to have to get on every hole in the practice round and know where east, south, north, west is, what's in there now. So, I mean, that was part of the thing too. You use that for your wind, and where the wind direction's coming from. But everything's just changed so much. But Tiger just played simply by feel. And I think that's one of the things that made him such an accomplished player, that despite playing in the modern era, he played like he was an old school pro. And so if you say, for instance, on the 6th hole at Augusta, it's par 3, very difficult hole, and the book says it's 13 yards downhill. But so, you give the guy the yardage, and a normal caddy will take the 13 yards off because this is what the actual yardage is with the elevation change. But we never did that. And we just went, okay, it's a little downhill, it's a little uphill and that. And yeah, so I think, there's a lot of great players that relied too much on the technology, and I think that's one of Tiger's, strengths, or was one of his strengths.
Definitely. No, really, really great insight. And 2000, 2001, he goes on a tear there and wins like 7 of 11 majors. Like, plays golf like golf had never really been played before in terms of the level of golf. I think his scoring average on tour will dip below 68, which is just averaging 4.5 under par, was pretty remarkable on those courses. Do you want to just talk to us a bit about, did you know that it was going to get that good? In terms of the level of golf, obviously he was a prodigy, but, wins the US Open by 15, wins the British Open by 8, goes on a tear, wins all 4 in a row. What was that like from your perspective? Did you realize at the time how good it was?
100% not. His expectations were so high. A successful week was only a win. some players are happy if they have a top 5, top 10, top 20 make the cut. Oh, sorry, I haven't been looking over here. I didn't realise you guys were all sitting there. Apologies about that. I'm overlooking this direction. His expectations are so high, and one of the most unusual things about Tiger is he didn't celebrate. It was always on to the next thing, next major. And I'll give you an example. So at the 2000 US Open, it was arguably, up until that point, it was considered the greatest major championship. Tiger finishes 12 under, the next guy's 3 over, wins by 15. And, it was a remarkable performance. So on Sunday, and also this was the event that, I nearly wouldn't be here because I nearly ran out of golf balls. That's another story that's in the book. It's a very good story. And Tiger signs a scorecard. I'm standing outside the scoring hut there. He's just won the US Open by 15. It's a monumental effort. And I had some friends from New Zealand, including Alan James and Alan Mackay were there, and a few other guys from New Zealand. And, it was a pretty exciting time. So Tiger comes out of the scoring trailer, and the first thing he asked me is about, this thing with the golf balls, what happened with the golf ball situation. But that's in the book. It's a good story. The next thing he says is, Steve, I'm going to play even better at St. Andrews. You get your ass over there and every blade of grass on that course. And I'm like, this is the pressure this guy's at. He just won the US Open by 15 and he's already thinking of 3 weeks down the track. And so immediately, instead of thinking, what am I going to drink tonight or what sort of a party we're having, my mind just goes straight to St. Andrews. And to his credit, in the 12 years that I caddied from, that was his best 72-hole performance. So he went away from Pebble Beach. He's just won it by 15, but he wasn't happy with his overall performance because he played 2 or 3 holes there that disgusted him. So I mean, this is the pressure of the guy. So he goes to St. Andrews and he wins that by 9, and it was the best he'd ever played. And of course, what was the next thing? Okay, the PGA, Steve. You need to get to Valhalla, get your ass to Valhalla, and keep this thing rolling. So there was the pressure of working for someone like that, was immense. But when I had the opportunity, to do a podcast with Evin, and that's how the book came about. Evin Priest is an Australian golf journalist who I know well. And during COVID, like a lot of people in the golf industry, particularly the media and that, they were looking for things to do. Evin did a podcast with me. It was called Chasing Majors, about all the major victories. And then he had some interest from some publishers about putting a book together. And so doing the book, and going through all my stats, which I hadn't done since I'd left Tiger, really jolted my memory. And then, sitting down with Evin, it was a lengthy period doing this book. And then the negotiations to do this book took some time because it's my third book, and there's a lot of pressure from the publisher on the time frame. And the second book I did, we ran out of time and it didn't finish how I wanted to, and I didn't want that to happen again. So the negotiations went on quite some time to get the right length of time that I knew it would take to write a book that I'd be proud of. And just, it's nice to say that you are proud of a book that you've written, and it's a very good insight into what it was like caddying for the, arguably the greatest player that's ever played the game. So that's kind of the pressure that I was under. So sitting down for 9 months and doing this book was quite healthy for my own well-being, if you like, because I was under so much stress caddying for this guy because expectations were so high. But people asked, why did you keep going back and forth to New Zealand? I just had to get away from it and, go and do my speedway and get into, you couldn't get two sports that are, different from racing here at Timarua Speedway to, walking the fairways of Augusta. Two different sorts of people and two different atmospheres. I mean, you couldn't get two sports more apart than those two. But yeah, the book was very fulfilling to be able to, look at all the accomplishments that Tiger did and read all my notes, go through my yardage books and so forth. So yeah, the book was very, very healthy for me.
That's great to hear. And in the book, you talk about bringing him here to New Zealand, which was, quite the event for Wellington, New Zealand, Paraparaumu Beach, and for the 2002 New Zealand Open. I believe that when you first got in his bag, that was pretty high on the pecking orders. When you win a major, you got to come play in the New Zealand Open. Is that?
Yeah, that's like you negotiate a deal to carry for a player, and they always talk about a major and what they'll give you and what they'll do, this, that, and the other, because there's such a big thing about winning majors. And I said, I don't want anything, mate. I just want you to play in the New Zealand Open, which is a handshake. And he honoured that handshake. Yeah, it was there's a few moments in your life that you just, Tuesday afternoon, practice round 10th hole, Paraparaumu Beach Golf Club, standing on that tee. I had tears in my eyes, like, how well do you know the course? Tiger would say, well, I've fucking slept in every bunker, and I've walked in every hazard here, So, and to see all those people there that has come to watch the guy that you're working for. I caddied for Peter here at Heratona, and I could sort of envisage. I watched a lot of the championships on TV, like we all did, but the coverage was very limited here. Watching the Masters and the Open Championship, and after I'd caddied for Peter, I had this dream of getting to America and getting amongst that, and that and then not only to get amongst it, and then to get to caddy for some good players, and then you came for a guy that's the best player in the world, and you get him to come and play at Paraparaumu. It was, look, we could talk about that, the pros and cons of how that tournament went. I'm just as caddy. He wanted to play, and there's a lot of shit at the fan that week, which was unfortunate. But to have him here, to have the opportunity to caddy for him at Paraparaumu was a very special moment.
100%. And quite interesting just how he embraced sort of the Kiwiana side of things in terms of, I believe, got quite involved with watching the All Blacks with you, the Springbok test that was off and on, I believe, around the same time as the Open Championship. So, he definitely, sunk his teeth into getting to know New Zealand, from the outside looking in. Yeah,
we always, I told him at every Open Championship, so Sunday morning of the Open Championship was always a Tri-Nations test match. And I said, you've got to play good this week, Tiger, because I can't get out of the house till this time when the match finishes. So, and he got in. The first time he watched that haka, he was just like, wow. It's a pretty inspiring thing when you don't know anything about it. And he started watching it. Yeah, so, we watched it, a lot of rugby. And when Phil Taurangi was doing golf commentary in these States, he would get the rugby on the satellite TV in the fitness trailer, and there'd be a bunch of us Kiwis and South Africans would be in that fitness trailer early in the morning in America watching the rugby when we could. And I had every test match that since day dot that the All Blacks play, I have $100 bet with Ernie Els, and like he ended up, Steve, or not him, his wife said, like, this bet's got to end, mate. You get two. So we had $100 bet on every match.
It's so good to hear. And in terms of, 2003, 2004, he goes through a bit of a swing change, and you've gathered all this data, I believe, probably around his Butch Harmon swing, which is the swing he had for much of the early success while you were together. What was it like watching him rebuild that in terms of, starting again, quite a different move, different coach, and, lost his world number one ranking at the time, I think, to Vijay Singh, but then comes back 2005 and goes on another tear. What was that like from your point of view?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Charlie. There's no player that's ever played the game and has been as successful as he has and changed direction midway through. And there's a couple of ways to look at that. So Tiger always had this thing that he believed you could own your swing instead of renting your swing. And what he meant by that is he believed that there must be a way that you can swing the club the same every single day. You all play golf, you know what it is. Some days you've got it, some days you haven't. And that he believed that, you could own your swing. And he thought you were always just renting your swing. And to the point where, and that, I'm just going off track here a little bit, but one of the funniest things, and it's in the book there, we're playing in the Canadian Open, the one where Tiger hit that unbelievable shot out of the bunker on the 18th, which I'd rank as the best shot he's ever hit the single best shot I've ever seen him hit was that one on the Sunday. On the Saturday, after the completion of the round, we're driving down the Kiwi 2 freeway, heading back to our hotel in Toronto. I always drove because he's a ratchet driver. And he thinks he's good, but not compared to me. And pull the car over, Steve. Pull the car over. What? We pulled the car over. This is on the Kiwi, the Queen Elizabeth Highway, the main highway in Toronto. Opens the trunk, gets a 7-iron out, and he's swinging on the side of the road. I mean, how many people do you think it didn't take to realise what Tiger Woods here he is swinging a golf club on the because he had this thought in his head and he had to do it right then, not 2 minutes later or 10 minutes we can do. I had to do it right now. That's how this guy thought. But as far as the other thing, and I never really asked Tiger this, but I think it was a pretty fair assumption, and all of us that were involved with Tiger made the same assumption, is that this guy was under more pressure than any athlete's ever been under. The scrutiny that he was under week in and week out. The Tiger Mania thing was just outrageous and so forth. I often joke with Tiger, I'm going to caddy with my crash helmet next week so I don't have to listen to all this shit that goes on. But he wanted a distraction from all of that. So he would decide, okay, this is where my golf swing is at. I can get better. I'm going to change my swing and I'm going to try and get better. And I know the consequences, it's going to be a big dip like that, but I'm going to go back like that. And that was he loved that challenge. And it also took him out of the spotlight for a little bit, and so forth. And took the pressure off him having to win every tournament because he knew, okay, if I can just have a period of time where I conceivably, if he kept going, he may have burned himself out because he only accepted a win as a successful week. But by allowing himself to take the pressure off himself and rebuild a swing, he knew he was giving himself some time where it wasn't absolutely necessary to win every tournament. And then he got back going, and he, like you said, he's unbelievable. He went through this transition period, and it was tough because he didn't play in the majors like he'd like to do, but he knew at the end of the road, because he when he changes his swing, he's going to work harder than anybody else, and he's going to make it work. And then the success came again. So the parallel between Butch and Hank, there's a lot of talk all over the years of which was a better coach than that. I took all the stats. I got all the stats, and there was an equal call. They were both great coaches, and he had the same amount of success. He might have driven the ball slightly better with Hank, and his iron play might have been slightly better with Butch, and his wedge play might have been a little bit better with Hank, and so forth. But overall, I rate them 100% equal.
Yeah. And, from 2005 there to 2009, he was winning, I think, majors at like a 33% clip or something ridiculous, and PGA Tour events around the same kind of rate. So in terms of then, thinking about all the wins in totality, the majors, what are some of the ones that stand out to you? Because I know, obviously, you had a special moment there in 2006 at the Open Championship after he just lost his dad. And I know that obviously 2000 with the work you did, getting St Andrews early and dissecting that course, such an iconic course. What ones stand out to you?
Yeah, it's a good question, but obviously the first one, I arguably it'd be interesting to see, or you can't ever theorize, but if Tiger hadn't won the PGA in '99, he would have entered the 2000 season still searching for that second major, and that would have been, that might have been too much stress for him. He may not have had the career that he had, but the 99 one was very important because he got that second one. And everybody, you watch golf and you look at how many champions have won one major championship and trying to win that second one. It's just, it's so difficult. Look at Adam Scott on Sunday. Look at Justin Rose in the last two majors. These are two guys that are desperately trying to get to their second major championship. It's just nearly impossible. It's not impossible, but it's hard to do. Look at Michael Campbell, and the list goes on of how many players, and Tiger was no different. So the 99 PGA was obviously a big moment. And then every caddy wants to win the Open Championship, St Andrews. Everyone wants to win the Open Championship. It's the greatest tournament in the world. There's no arguing that. It has the biggest qualifying. Anybody you can start right here in New Zealand and work your way qualifying through, regional qualifying, regional country qualifying to Australasian qualifying to final qualifying and play in the Open Championship. You can't do that at the other major championship. So it's a great tournament. And in 1990, when Nick Faldo won it, Fanny Sunison was a very close friend of mine, and I was walking up the 18th hole, or just outside there, up beside those apartments on the 18th hole there, when Nick won the Open, and it was just, the atmosphere was just unbelievable. And I said, that's something I want to do. Yeah. So, and, Tiger did that twice. But, when Tiger, had the opportunity in 2001 to be the first player to win, 4 straight majors, that was an opportunity that's never going to be, it'll never happen again, and probably there'll never be another player that actually has that opportunity. So if you think about the PGA Championship then finished in August, and the Masters is not till, the PGA back then finished in August, it's now in May, but between August and April when the Masters, it's 8 months it's an 8-month period, and the talk and the all the media attention and everything, it was just so much about whether Tiger could do it or not, and to the point where Tiger, he loves to watch ESPN and he loves the sport. That he didn't, after a while, he didn't watch any sports, didn't read a newspaper, didn't listen to any radio, no sport, because he got sick and tired of hearing about it too. And then, the more you hear about it, the more it's probably you start thinking about it. But that was, that win there, given it's an opportunity that's never going to happen again, was the ultimate. And it was partly, well, not partly, but it was even more thrilling, or however you want to look at it, because he was playing with my mate Phil on the Sunday, and Tiger had been practicing this shot all year for the 13th hole. It's a hole he hated, the 13th hole, and he was practicing the shot. This massive sweeping hook, not a duck hook, but a big sweeping hook, and he'd started out almost at the 12th tee, and sweep this. It was a massive, and he practiced it every single day on the practice range in 2001. He practiced the shot. But on Thursday, he didn't hit it. Friday, didn't hit it. Saturday, didn't hit it. And it came to Sunday. I said, Tiger, it's time for that shot here. He said, yeah, you're right, Stevie. And he hit it just as good as he'd hit it in any practice. He probably hit the shot 1,000 times that year, and he hit it. And it was an absolute, it couldn't have been any better. And we're walking up there, and Mickelson teed off first. And, for him, it's a cut. And he hit this driver, and he hit the shit out of it. And then we're walking up there, and Tiger's ball is ahead of Phil's. And Tiger just quietly said to him, next time, take the head cover off it. Well, and that broke him. He it was an unbelievable battle, and Phil, that was it. It was one of the best lines I've ever heard.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's a monumental moment in golf. A guy's got, is it the Tiger Slam or is it the Grand Slam? You can answer that yourself. Tiger reckons it's the Grand Slam because he had four of them sitting on the bar at home, so he called it the Grand Slam. But yeah, that was pretty special. And the 2008 US Open at Torrey Pines was right up there for the fact that that's Tiger's, is of course that he went to see his first PGA Tour event at. He lived not far from there, and that was the first time he, as a youngster, and they used to play the World Junior?
The World Junior there.
Yeah. Whatever they call it. Number of New Zealanders have played in that. So when the USGA announced that the US Open was going to be at Torrey Pines, I'd never seen Tiger so fascinated with one event. We'd play the Torrey Pines tournament every year in January, and for the 4 years leading up to the US Open, after the USJ announced that the tournament was going to be, he just talked about it so much. Where's the pin placements going to be here, Steve? How are they going to do the fairway? Will they lengthen this hole? What will it? It was just, he was besotted by this tournament, absolutely besotted. But he comes into the tournament, with a ruptured knee and a broken fibula, and he shouldn't even be playing. And usually before a major championship, I'd spend the week with him practicing, but I didn't this time because he couldn't practice. And then I'm driving, flew into Los Angeles, driving down to San Diego, and Hank calls his coach and says, Steve, he's got no fucking right playing the tournament. We just played 9 holes today at Pelican, and he lost 6 balls. and he plays the practice round. I'm thinking, man, this is going to be a short week. I better look at my Air New Zealand flight's going to make Friday's flight home. Going to be a short week here. Somehow he summoned it up. I don't know how he did it, but somehow he summoned up the courage. I even told him on Friday, we teed off the 10th hole, and we got round to the first hole, and he made 3 doubles on the first hole that week. 3 doubles. Who was the last guy to win a US Open with 3 doubles, or he had 5 for the week, 3 on the first hole? And he hit a shot off the cart path, and I heard this horrible sound in his knee, and I said to Tiger, look, you got a long career ahead, is it worth it? And he just said, fuck you, Stevie, I'm winning the tournament. All right. You don't like my French, but that's exactly what he said to me. And once again, that tournament came to a pivotal moment on the 72nd hole. Tiger laid it up in the right rough there, and we had the longest debate ever. Tiger wanted to hit a 56 degree wedge, and the yardage said that it was a 56 degree, but my instincts was telling me it was a 60 degree wedge. It was the only possible way to get it close. Well, you couldn't actually get it really stony. I forced him into hitting the shot that I wanted him to hit. Obviously he hit a great shot, and you're standing there and you watch that puddle, that hole had just woggled all the way down into the hole for a playoff with Rocco Mediate. And, so Tiger didn't, hit another golf ball for 6 months after that. He shouldn't have played in it, but he somehow summoned up the courage. And like every night he was on the table with his masseuse and physio getting worked on. And somehow the golfing gods allowed him to win that tournament, because he had no right winning it, and he didn't even play good enough to win it. But it's all, if there's ever a tournament I felt where the intimidation factor, Jack Nicklaus and Tiger both had an intimidation factor. The guys there's a lot of guys that intimidated them, that they were intimidated by playing with him. And that week, I don't know, it's like his name was on the board and nobody wanted to win the tournament. It was bizarre. And to the point where on the Monday playoff, Rocco rocks up in the same gear as Tiger, black pants, red shirts. Tiger's like, you can't be serious.
So it was such an incredible week, and I think it's probably going to go down as the last ever 18-hole playoff now for a major champion. Because now they're all sudden death or 3 holes. So really fascinating stories. And your time with Tiger winds down, obviously, 2011, after his life kind of, takes a bit of a crazy turn. And then you go and get on the bag of Adam Scott, and you have an amazing victory there at the Masters in 2013. What was it like going from, I imagine almost could be like a traveling circus like Tiger in terms of all the fans, and he's probably, at the time, was one of the most famous guys in the whole world, to going to a guy like Adam to try and get him across the line for his first major?
Yeah, look, it was a great challenge, because Adam was someone, I was a friend with Adam, and somewhat surprised that he hadn't been more successful in major championships. And I quickly identified with him, that his routine in the major championship wasn't going to cut it. Wasn't doing what I would consider, and what I had been watching from the greatest player in the world, to how you prepare for them and how you play major championships. So it was really, Adam played 3 straight years and had the lowest aggregate score 3 straight years in the major championships. Only him and Tiger have done that, 3 straight consecutive years. So it was pretty pleasing. But he won one, possibly should have won, realistically at least 3. He played so well, but he had to get the first one, and that was another one of the moments you cherish in that. So you get to the playoff. We're on the second playoff hole against Angel Cabrera, and both hit it down the 10th fairway, and we knew it was going to be the last hole. It was raining and light was fading, and so if we didn't, it was sudden death, and it was the second sudden death hole. So if it wasn't complete on this hole, we're going to have to come back Monday morning. Now, I knew Adam wouldn't go to sleep at all thinking, I could win the Masters tomorrow, whereas Angel Cabrera to go back having a bottle of wine and a cigar and come back tomorrow and say, we're ready to go. He's just an absolute character. So, Adam hit his tee shot. They both hit their tee shots there, and Angel played first. The Sunday pin at the 10th hole at Augusta is always in the back left, and you play to the middle of the green because you just can't go over the green there. You just can't. So everyone hits it under the hole, and it's an uphill putt from under the hole, obviously. And we got down there. I gave Adam the yardage, and he said 7 iron. And I said, no, it's a 3. We called it a flighted 6. Basically, that was like a description for a 3/4 shot. To get it back, try and get it back further back into the green, closer than where Cabrera was. And he hit what he would describe as it's a simple looking shot when you look at it on TV, but it was, if you ask Adam what the greatest shot he's ever hit, it was that shot, because he actually got it right back to the pin. And then we're walking up there, and I knew that he, up until this point, hadn't had a lot of success at Augusta. He's probably never had this putt before, and so this is 2013, and I've got a note in my book from 1988 when I was caddying for Greg, because Greg had that putt. Because you seldom have that putt, because you always leave it 20 feet under the hole. It's just what you do there on Sunday. And I had written in my book, breaks a lot more than it looks, because the green hadn't changed. And we get up there, and whether Adam was going to ask me to read the putt or not, I was going to have something to say, because I knew that he wouldn't know that. It's a bit of an optical illusion. So we read the putt. He said, I got it 1 cup out. And my exact words, and excuse the French, was that I thought, that's not even fucking close. It's 2.5 cups. So he's read it that much, and I've given it this much. And, so a player has to have a lot of faith in the caddy in this particular moment, because he's not even close, but I'm assuring him that I know. And, he knocks that putt in. And, it was a monumental moment. First, I was caddying for Greg, and Adam looked up. Greg was his childhood hero in that, and Greg never won it, and he desperately wanted to win that tournament, and so did Adam. And so, interesting enough, the first phone call that I took, not the first forward phone call that I got, but the first person I spoke to when I was driving back in my car was Greg.
Wow.
And, I said, you wouldn't believe it. And I was telling him, he said, I read your lips, what you said there. And he said, is this what you said to him? And I said, yeah. He said, you haven't changed, Steve. You're still a redneck.
Yeah. That was incredible stuff. And the first Australian ever to win the Masters, and I think still the only. So, yeah, unbelievable stuff.
But that's, that's where a good caddy's worth their weight in gold, because 95% of caddies right there and then are just going to agree with the player, because if he hits the putt that far out and it misses by that much high, he's going to go, if I had hit it where I would have got, I could have won the Masters. But you got to treat every hole, every situation as, you got to look at it like, this is not for the Masters. It's just another putt, and this is how it breaks. You can't let the situation get on top of you. But yeah, that was one of a lot of the best highlights. Not the Tiger, but obviously with Adam.
Yeah, no, incredible stuff. And in terms of now, getting more towards present day, a couple of quick questions here. Ryan Fox has been on a bit of a tear the last, few months. Got a couple of PGA Tour wins under his belt. Just another top 20 at the US Open just being this last weekend. What's it like for you to see a Kiwi, at the top of those leaderboards on the PGA Tour? And because it's been a while since we've had a Kiwi on the global stage on the men's side, that is.
Yeah, look, I mean, I've caddied for Ryan a few times, and I identified the first time I caddied for Ryan at the New Zealand Open. He's got what I call the X factor, and I could identify straight away that this guy was going to be a good player. It's taken him a while to get there, and he has the potential to win a major championship. And Royal Portrush coming up for the British Open. There's no Open Championship course that probably suits him better. And to the best of my memory, I think he shot the lowest 9-hole score there the last time they played at Portrush. I think it was 2000 when Lowry won. Was it
2019?
19. I believe he shot the lowest 9-hole score on Sunday. It would not surprise me one bit if he won the Open Championship there. Look, he's a great player, Ryan. He plays quickly. He's got a lot of flair, and it's absolutely really, really exciting to see a guy out there. And I was telling Dylan, we were talking about Ryan. I said it's interesting, when Lydia Ko had such an amazing run, it inspired a lot of juniors, particularly female juniors, to get into the game. Well, yesterday I was at the Hire Centre, just talking to two guys at the Hire Centre that don't know one end of a golf club for another, who've been watching Ryan, and they decided to go and get some second-hand golf clubs and go to the driving range. And, that's unbelievable. That's just two guys I spoke to at the Hire Centre. You imagine around New Zealand, there'd be other people. So it gets more people into the game. It inspires people. They know that the PGA Tour is the ultimate thing. And if you've got a Kiwi, we've got one Kiwi playing on the PGA Tour. It's not like the Australians. They got 10 in other countries. We've got one guy, and it's an absolute delight to be able to watch someone like him playing on the PGA Tour and be successful and fulfilling his potential, because he's really, really good, Ryan. And it's not of no surprise to me that he's done well. So it's great for golf here. And, like I said, I believe he's got the ability to win a major championship. So, and he's got a course coming up in a few weeks that absolutely suits him. So, let's see if he can do it.
For sure, Portrush will be a great story, and our own Sam Keats, superintendent here, is going out to help the R&A get that course ready for tournament conditions. So, going to be great just with the Kiwi connections far and wide out there. So, I mean, Steve, it's just been so great to hear you unpack the amazing 12 years that you spent on Tiger's bag and talk about the origins of your, how you got into caddying to start with. Just a little bit of a note on your own game. You're playing much these days, obviously, probably didn't want to see a golf course outside of caddying for a while there, but yeah, how's your own game?
Look, it's funny, when you work as a golf caddy and that, I hardly played when I was caddying, because you spend so much time at the golf course, not only, with the player and that, but, I was so meticulous. Like, I was at the golf course every morning. I was just, this guy was just so demanding, and I was there every morning getting a feel for the golf course and that. So any opportunity I had to do other things, it was never going to be go and play golf. And then, so I retired from caddying in 2020 and started playing a bit of golf again. And the first thing I had to get my head around was, when you're playing, I'm so used to seeing good shots, and then all of a sudden I'm seeing a lot of shit shots here. And honestly, I had to. It took me a while to adjust, because your eyes are trained to hit where you see a golf ball go, but it goes there, and mine are going there, they're going there. So I had a little time to adjust, but look, I play off a 6 handicap, but I'm just a social player. But it did take a while to adjust to that.
Yeah, 6 is still pretty good going, I think. But look, Steve, it's been great having you here at the club. We've really been looking forward to it since it got announced. And, the book is Together We Roared. It's a fantastic read, and so many nuggets like the ones Steve has spoken about. There's 20 times that in the book. So many great little insights there with your time with Tiger. So, yeah, from behalf of myself and Royal Wellington Golf Club, thanks very much for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. Thank you. I talked about the 99 PGA sort of thing, but what if the 76 New Zealand Open wasn't here?
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, it's I'm always, and it's, I can remember, some of the holes and some of the shots that Peter hit, and it was funny, and this will be the last thing I'll say, but when at the end of the week with Peter, he said to me, "Steve, I just want to give you one bit of advice." I said, "What's that, Mr. Thompson?" He said, "You're a very good caddy, but I want you to complete your education." And I failed on that big time. When the 2013 President's Cup was at Muirfield, and I took my son there, and I introduced my son to Peter, Peter said to him, "I don't want you to be like your dad," and that. Well, my son's a professional scooter rider, and he's dropped out of school too. So Peter's up there rolling his eyes at me. He said, "Steve, you didn't listen to me once, but twice." So anyway, hey, thanks for coming along tonight. Yeah, look, it's great to come to Royal Wellington. I didn't have the opportunity today to come and look at the golf course, which I will do as I had something else to do. But I understand the golf course is, world class. I spoke to a couple of people that played here in the, is it called the Asia Pacific Amateur? Yeah. And they were very, very impressed with the course, as were a couple of the commentators that commentated. So you're fortunate to play a very, very good golf course. Thanks for coming along tonight. And wherever Charlie's got me set up, happy to sign your book. And yeah, thanks for coming tonight.